So I actually finished Allegiant today. I don't know how I feel about it. I'll tell you why. Mostly because someone deliberately sent me a spoiler on Tumblr. And when I say spoiler, I mean the big one for you, those of you who have read it. So that essentially ruined the book for me before I even got it. I actually did get my hands on my copy. I wasn't as excited to read it as I would have been. But now that I've actually read the entire book, I still kind of feel the same as I did. Just because, I don't know, it just wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. I mean, it was great, it was beautifully written, but it wasn't the ending I was thinking. First things first, this is the warning part of the video. I'm going to go right into major spoilers, so if you haven't read the book yet, turn back now, because I don't want you guys to have it ruined like it was ruined for me, because it really kind of takes away the punch of the last book. So if you don't want to be spoiled, leave now. But if you're already spoiled like me, I guess you could continue watching. But I definitely think if you haven't read it, just leave now. Just leave. So Evelyn, God, I hate that bitch. I know she's For's mom and all, but she's just as bad as Janine was. She is majorly power tripping on control, and she thinks she's gonna be this new age leader over the city, but really she's not much different than Janine was. And it's like kind of crazy because this is For's mother. I guess I kind of thought that she'd be the opposite of Marcus, and she's really not. She's just not physically abusing him, but she's still not a good person. So it turns out that Edward is actually still alive. You know, from the first book when he got kind of stabbed in the eye by Peter. Well, he's back, and he's kind of in the middle of this demonstration out on the streets, and he gets freaking shot. And you know this shit was orchestrated by Evelyn. It was never confirmed, but it's kind of implied that this was her fault. Like, what the fuck? You know, first he loses an eye, and then he dies. That rhymes. But that's not funny. It is not funny. At all. It was very sad. It was sudden, but it was sad. This group of people in the city called the Allegiant, they form a plot to go outside the fence, because, you know, that's what the Edith Pryor video said to do. But we all know something's up with that. But anyway, they plot to send a group of people outside the fence, and you know what's waiting outside there. You know it's District 12. You're all thinking it. So before they actually leave the city, For goes to the prison where Caleb is being kept, you know, for his trial, and he decides to break him out. I don't know why, because this asshole made the ultimate betrayal and almost got his sister killed, and yet she wants him to be rescued. So For breaks him out and decides, let's bring him with us. Personally, I would have left him there, because how do you forgive that shit? God, shit starts going down. They escape to the outside, and then they get ambushed, and freaking Tori dies. These deaths just seem to happen so quickly. It's like you think, you know, they're gonna survive this action, and then you turn around and somebody gets shot. Like, that just breaks my heart. And I loved it when they got out past the fence and they were walking through the broken down cities, and Triss was getting all confused at the ads for like the Coke and the energy drinks and the vodka, and I just thought that was really funny. We get to this airport compound, which is like the Genetic Warfare Bureau, and it turns out that they're told the Divergent are actually considered the success in the experiments where they're the healed genes, and then actually everybody else, the so-called normal people from before, are considered like genetically damaged. And Trisha's mom actually apparently took part in these genetic experiments, and it all, you know, it gets explained later, but it was just, there was all this mumbo jumbo about, you know, every bad thing anybody has ever done is because of their, you know, genes. And I'm like, bad genes do not excuse behavior. Choice determines behavior. I mean, I don't know how many of you actually watch the BBC show Sherlock, but I just recently got into it, and I have become very obsessed with it. And as I was reading Allegiant, I actually found the quote that kind of, spoiler, relates to Sherlock's fake suicide. And it can be found on page 142. Tricking someone into grief is one of the cruelest tricks a person can play. We all know that's going to relate when Sherlock and John are reunited this coming season. Just thought I'd throw that out there. There's some genetic testing done on Triss and Tobias, and it turns out that Tobias is not actually a Divergent. He just comes across as one, but he's technically one of the genetically damaged people, which then kind of breaks him apart because he really feels, he already felt damaged to begin with because of his upbringing, but then being told that he wasn't this, special part of the population, he really felt like even more separate than he already did, and it was really sad. Marcus's trial comes up, and of course he's not executed because we're not going to execute the bad guy, for God's sakes. But his punishment is to be sent outside the fence and he's not allowed to return. Yeah, that's going to work out well. Turns out that the Bureau worked with Janine to use that attack serum that they used on everybody. What the fuck? Aren't they supposed to be like the opposite of what Janine and Evelyn are doing? But it turns out they're not really that much better. Jesus Christ. Four and Triss are starting to argue like they did in Insurgent, and it was really starting to get on my nerves, because you would think after them saying, oh, I trust you, and we're going to tell each other everything, they wouldn't argue so freaking much, but then they're just like at each other's throats every 2 seconds, and it was just so freaking aggravating. Now, Uriah, is that how you say his name? Uriah? He's in a coma now because of Nita and this ill-fated mission. I completely forgot what it was because it is all just like so like ridiculous. And Tobias was involved with this, but I guess he didn't know how bad it was going to be, and there was an explosion, and Uriah was too close to the explosion site, so he kind of, he wasn't blown up, but he was close enough where it definitely did some damage to his brain, so he was in a coma, and they don't think he's going to wake up. Uriah is brain dead, and he's definitely not going to wake up, and it turns out that the Bureau wants to drop this memory serum on the city and just reset everybody so the experiment is like not a failure, and so Triss decides she's going to fight the death serum that protects this, reset serum, and she's going to have to kind of break into the lab, which I don't know how well that's going to go. So Triss and Tobias make up after, his involvement in the whole explosion plot. Oh, and oh my god, they have the sex. They totally get it on. And I was like, yes! Oh my god, I loved it. I was fangirling so hard. Triss and Caleb make peace with each other, and they exchange I love yous after essentially just bickering, well, not bickering, but ignoring, fighting, making snide remarks all throughout the book. So they come back together, sort of, and she decides she's not going to let him sacrifice himself, and there's a bad chance that she's going to be able to fight the death serum, so she puts herself in this situation, and after the bombs explode and open the doors, she's shot. And then cut to Tobias in the actual city. He confronts his mother and says, you can have me or you can have the power. Make your choice. And she chooses him. I wasn't expecting that. I thought she was going to be like, well, power and comfort and all this is too important. But no, she chose him. And I cried. It was so sweet. Freaking book. So Triss fights the death serum and she gets into the lab and David is there. And he freaking shoots her. But she manages to set off the serum that's going to reset the Bureau's minds, and she collapses and she sees her mom, and she knows she's dying, and her mom tells her, her friends are going to be okay and they're going to be there for each other, and then she just dies. When has a young adult author ever killed off the main character? That does not happen. God, I freaking hate this. So, Tobias and, who is he with? I forget who it is. Anyway, Johanna, Evelyn, and Marcus finally agree to a treaty, and Peter ends up taking the memory serum, so his mind is essentially wiped, so he gets to begin again. Asshole. They finally return to the compound, and he learns about Triss's death, and he goes numb. And I think that was the sadder part for me, not Triss dying, but seeing Tobias's reaction. God, it gets so sad. So right after Tobias learns of Triss's death, you know, he remembers all the times he first saw her and just reliving that, and I was like, it was so painful. And then pretty much right after that, Yuria is unplugged from life support, and at this point my heart is like, can't handle any more feels. And Tobias decides to go back to his old abnegation house, and he is considering taking the memory serum that Peter took, because he doesn't know if he can stand, you know, having all these memories of Triss and, you know, her not being there. But Christina had actually followed him into the house and convinces him not to take it, and he ends up crying, I think, for the first time since he found out that Triss had died. And it just broke my heart. The prologue takes place 2.5 years after everything has happened, and Tobias is working in the government, and under Johanna, everything has changed, and there's no more factions, and everything is pretty peaceful, which is kind of crazy considering it's only a third book, and in dystopian series, it's very hard to kind of tie everything up. But they managed to do it very nicely, which I wasn't expecting. He is obviously still brokenhearted over Triss's death, but he manages to be able to move on a little bit. I don't think he ever will. And to memorialize her, he goes ziplining, and as he's going, he actually is scattering her ashes above the city, which was so great. I love that part. So that's my review for Allegiant. I hope you guys liked it. I would probably give this book, well, actually on Goodreads, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, which is kind of odd because I gave the last 2 books like 5 and 4, but this one, although I still thought it was very well written, it was not as, I just felt like it wasn't as good as the first 2. I still liked it very much. I was definitely moved by it, as I've said, but it did not hold up to the previous 2 books. But I still think it was a very fitting end to the series, and I'm always gonna love this series. So thanks for watching. Leave your comments below and let me know what you think. Alright, see you next time.